Hi, welcome to this week's edition of In the Hoods. This week we're going to be talking about Greenwich Village. Greenwich Village really is comprised of three places: Greenwich Village proper, the West Village, and also the Meatpacking District. I'm only going to be speaking about what I call Greenwich Village proper, which runs from 14th Street on the north to Houston Street on the south, 7th Avenue on the west, and Broadway on the east. This is the core of Greenwich Village. Now, Greenwich Village, like all other neighborhoods, began as Dutch farmland, and the name is really derived from the Dutch, meaning green district. And it was apparently where the inner city people of the 1700s went for fresh air. It's hard to believe. Anyway, it was also in the 1700s where some of these farmers began to subdivide their land and allow for residential housing, and people began to move north into Greenwich Village, into this area, which became Greenwich Village. And slowly it began to be inhabited. It is really famous. It really becomes more famous in the 1800s. But Greenwich Village has always been a place that has attracted artists and the creative amongst us. So, with that in mind, in the 1800s, a building was constructed on West 10th Street called the Studio Building. And it was constructed with fine artists in mind, with big arched north-facing windows to allow a lot of northern light in, which painters really like. The light is a little flatter. This studio building, some of our famous artists have painted there. We have Frederick Church, Winslow Homer, and Albert Bierstadt, all painted in this building. Unfortunately, in the 1950s, it was torn down and replaced with an apartment building. I'm not sure if we call that progress, but I know some do. But also on 10th Street was the Albert Hotel, which was open all through the 1800s, and I believe first opened in the 1700s under a different name. But this hotel was known for housing many writers and fine artists. Salvador Dali lived here at one point, so did Robert Louis Stevenson, and a host of others. It began to get kind of run down in the 70s, and by then the rock and roll crowd had found it, and it was apparently a real sex, drugs, and rock and roll location, but quite seedy and down on its luck. But the mamas and papas lived there, as did Paul Butterfield. But this property was bought by a developer and now is a cooperative apartment building. So people actually own their apartments there. Greenwich Village is home to Washington Square Park, which is really right at the center of it, which is surrounded by beautiful Federalist townhouses, which you find reference to in Henry James's novels. But what is very little known about Washington Square Park is that the land it was built on served as a potter's field a burial ground for 20,000 impoverished New Yorkers from 1797 to 1823. And they're still buried there. Today, it is surrounded on two sides by New York University. If you walk west over to 6th Avenue, you'll come upon one of the most famous basketball courts with games which continue today. There's street pickup games. People come from all over to play there. And it's quite famous in street basketball communities. It was the home of the Beat generation in the 1950s, which continued into the counterculture of the 1960s. The Greenwich Village is also home to the Stonewall Inn, which was the site in 1969 of the Stonewall riots, which gave rise to the LGBTQ community. So a lot of social movements have been launched here. It is still an area which attracts energy, creative energy, and youth. Although I think in terms of the artistic community, you really have to have already made it to be able to afford to live here now.